So we're going to start off our recipe the day before. We're going to take any vessel with a lid and we're going to warm up water, and we're going to add 2 tablespoons of warm water so we can activate our yeast, and we're going to add 2 tablespoons of bread flour. Not all-purpose flour, I'm using bread flour here. I'm also going to add my ½ teaspoon of yeast. I'm using active dry yeast, not instant yeast. That is important. And we're going to give this a mix. And we are going to allow this to sit out on our counter for 8 hours. So make sure to place your lid on, but you're not going to screw this tightly. It's important because this fermentation process creates gases, and that could cause a little explosion, and we don't want that. So once your 8 hours have elapsed, we're going to put this in the fridge overnight. When we're ready to bake, I'm going to set out my ingredients. All these ingredients were out for over an hour because I want them to be at room temperature. That is important. We're going to heat up our milk to 100 to 110 degrees because we want to activate our yeast. We don't want to throw in all of our ingredients in the mixer and find out your yeast was dead. So we're going to avoid that by adding our yeast, 4 teaspoons, our sugar, 4 tablespoons, and our 1.5 cups of milk to a container. And we're going to mix this, and we're going to let it sit for about 5 minutes. And we're going to let it do its magical thing. After 5 minutes, your yeast and milk and sugar mixture should be foamy and creamy and active and alive, just like this. So we are now going to add these ingredients to our mixer to continue the process. We are also going to add our room temperature starter. We take this starter out of the fridge an hour or so before we even start baking. Add that to your mixer. We are also going to add 1 whole egg. This helps with the texture. And bread, Pan Sobao and specifically from Puerto Rico, has a very sweet taste and a sweet aftertaste, and I create that by adding an entire can of condensed milk, 14 ounces. The original recipe for Pan Sobao calls for lard, but I'm using a 1/4 cup of unsalted butter and a 1/4 cup of shortening. Now we're going to start adding our flour. I'm using bread flour for this recipe, not all-purpose flour. We're developing gluten, and bread flour has a particular gluten developing tendency. Basically, it has more protein in it, so those factors are going to determine gluten development. So what we're not going to do as well, we are not going to add 6 cups of flour all at once to our mixer. I put in the recipe 6 cups of flour, but your recipe is a guideline and you're going to use it as such. You're going to add flour in batches. I'm using a ½ cup measure here, and we're going to start looking at our dough, adding flour, looking at our dough, adding flour. We're not going to just dump it in because we might not need all 6 cups. So we're going to add flour, and we're going to watch it. What you're looking for is for your dough to congeal, to develop enough gluten that it separates from the bottom and the sides of your bowl. Developing gluten takes time, so we're going to mix this for a while. You're going to add flour, and you're going to watch it. Our dough is starting to develop gluten and is starting to congeal, and that is what we're looking for. At this point, I move on to adding flour in a sort of tablespoons. Now that our dough has come together, I'm going to add my 1.5 tablespoons of salt. Not before, because we don't want to kill our yeast, so I wait till this point to add my salt. I'm using kosher salt. If you're using fine salt, you might need less salt, so adjust accordingly. We're going to continue to mix this and add flour as needed. It's looking to congeal at this point. It's looking to come together. So I'm watching it. I'm going to stop and watch it. You see the bottom of our bowl? It's starting to look clean, and your dough is starting to become one solid mass. That is what we're looking for. At this point, I'm explaining that we're going to let this go on speed 2 for 8 to 10 minutes to develop gluten. At this point, I'm not going to add any more flour. Set your timer for 8 minutes and let it go. Perfect. Now we're going to take off our hook, and I'm going to show you something here after I'm done. What you want is for nothing to come back at you when you put your hand in your dough. If you have ingredients coming back, you probably need more mixing time or more flour. We're going to set a timer for 1 hour, and we're going to let her rest in a warm place. After your first hour has elapsed, we're going to start working with our dough. She has developed gases, and she has rested. So we're going to pat it down, slap it, punch it, do whatever you want. Nothing should come back on your hand. My hand is clean at this point. And we're also going to pull our dough. You're going to grab your dough from a corner, and you're going to pull upwards and drop. Lift upwards and drop. Lift, fold over and drop. We're going to do this a few times. We're deflating the gases in our dough. We're working our dough right now. Continue to do this. And now we're going to let her rest for 5 to 10 minutes. Set your timer if you need to. Once that's done, you're going to come back and shape your dough and allow afterwards your dough to ferment for the last time before we're going to bake it. So you'll notice that I'm not using any flour in my work surface. I don't know why I needed to show you the bowl, but that happens. So you see that I'm not putting excess flour on my work surface. I don't like to add flour that hasn't developed gluten. It changes the end flavor, but if you don't feel safe and you want to add a little bit of flour on your work surface, go right ahead. You're also welcome at this point to use a rolling pin. I don't use a rolling pin. I like to feel what I'm doing. It's really important. So if you want to use a rolling pin to flatten this out, go ahead. At this point, I'm going to mark the shapes that I'm going to be cutting out. I'm going to use 3 loaves for this recipe. And what we're going to do is each one of our loaves, we're going to flatten it into a kind of rectangle. This takes time. Take your time. You can use a rolling pin here if you want to. You're looking for a rectangle. Nothing is sticking. That's important. So now we're going to start folding our dough to create our loaf nice and tightly. You don't want any air pockets in the middle of your bread. And the corners, you notice that I'm going inwards because I don't want it to be thinner than the rest of my bread loaf and burn in the oven. So I'm tucking in those corners inwards. I'm tucking. And I'm going to turn my dough seam side up. And now I'm going to seal it. Pinch it. Pinch those open corners, one with the other. Sealing, all across your loaf, including the corners. Pinch, seal, pinch, and seal. We're going to roll it. And at this point, I consider this bread loaf ready to be placed on my baking sheet with parchment paper. My dough is not perfect. It has imperfections, but that is okay. I'm going to show you that right here. Right there. Those creases, that's okay. If you want to flatten them out, just keep rolling your dough. I'm going to continue to do this with all of my dough, flattening it out into a rectangle shape or kind of oval. Whatever you want to call it. It needs to be flat so we can roll it nice and tightly. Roll. Continue to do this. Tuck in your corners. Roll. And remember to turn your dough seam side up so that you can pinch those seams together. Once you're done, put it on your baking sheet and move on to the next one. Once you have them, we are going to allow our breads to ferment for 30 minutes and rise. Once your timer is up, you're going to have these fluffy bread loaves that are almost ready to bake. We're going to do an egg wash. I have equal parts an egg and 2 tablespoons of milk, whole milk. We're going to egg wash them. They should be springy. That's what I'm showing you here. They should, when you press them, bounce back. That means they're ready to bake. We're going to bake this at 400 degrees, and we're going to add ice to the bottom of our oven to create steam. I'm going to show you right there. Just a sheet pan. Once it's done, your bread is going to be spectacular. It is so soft and it smells so good. We're going to wait for it to cool, which is the hardest part. And I'm going to cut into it so I can show you the crumb. This bread is so nostalgic. It is just like walking into una panadería in Puerto Rico. Look at that. It's soft. It's beautiful. I really hope you enjoy this recipe. Thanks for watching. Bye.